Hi, welcome to Real Estate Resource. Thanks for checking in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. I hope you enjoy this video. So, today we're going to talk about amendments, addenda, advisories, right? The stuff that gets attached to your purchase agreements and added into your transactions, because there are specific uses for these forms. And sometimes what we do is we avoid the use of the form and we try to, figure out another way around arriving at that same conclusion, right? Whatever the tool is that we need, instead of using the correct tool, we're using, whatever is handy or easiest, right? We always look for the path of least resistance. So this is about doing things the right way, not the easy way, So, it's a job needs a hammer and we're using a screwdriver. So we want to do things the right way. So before I share my screen and get started, does anybody have any questions about anything? Anything that you need some help with? This is a time we can address it before we jump into this topic. No?
Kyle.
Go ahead. Yes, Jesus.
This is Jesus. Okay, on the transaction that I have with Kenya, where I believe she added someone else. It was assignment, or what was that additional assignee? Not additional.
Yeah, it's assignment of agreement addendum, and it's actually one of the forms that we're going to talk about today. So
Okay, and so should I wait?
Well, you could ask your question now, but that is one of the forms. That's one of the things that we're going to discuss. Is that
From
assignment?
that point on, now he's added to the contract. From this point on, he's going to sign the other. Gosh, I black out.
He has to acknowledge the disclosures.
Additional signature addendum?
No, you don't need additional signature addendum. Is only for when you have more than two buyers, right? They have more than two buyers that are purchasing the property, and you start from the beginning, right? So you have 3 or 4 or 5 buyers even that are signing the original offer, the initial offer that I'm submitting. Then I would need the additional signature addendum. Okay, and we're going to talk about that too, because we have that in here. That's not used to add somebody, and you don't need to use that after you've used the assignment of agreement addendum. So we'll talk about both. Okay, any other questions, guys? No. As a matter of fact, while we're having this conversation, I just realized I didn't have the assignment of agreement addendum open, so I'm going to go right now and I'm going to go get it. So if anybody has any other questions, this is a perfect opportunity to ask a question. So here's the thing. We're going to start with the advisories. So when I do start sharing the screen, it's going to be the advisories, and there's only a couple of them that we're going to use. And what these advisories do is they kind of just lay out how or what's the requirement and what is and what isn't required of a seller and a buyer in specific transactions. So that is what advisories do, like just what they say, an advisory, right? So let me get this assignment of agreement addendum here so I can just jump right in. There we go. Where'd it go? Assignment. There it is. All right. Sorry, I'm doing some little work here while you guys are watching me work. Sorry. Okay. Let's start with the advisories, and I think I have the assignment of agreement then. I'm ready to go. So, there we go. Sorry, I'm just standing at the screen right now. Okay. All right. So let's get going with the advisories. Let's start. All right. I'm going to share my screen. Somebody asked a question here in the chat. Do buyer's agents absolutely have to do an AVID? Yeah, if you work in this office, you absolutely have to do an AVID. That is not a required form in the state of California. It's an advised form in the state of California. They say, hey, this is something you should use. But here in the office, it's a requirement. You must have an Avid. Okay. All right, so let me share my screen. You guys should just be looking at a blank desktop right now. And that's going to change because I'm going to start with the short sale addendum. Okay, so this is a form that you're going to add to your purchase agreement whenever you're doing a short sale. You guys are seeing the short sale addendum, right? Yes? Everybody, just somebody who's got their camera on, give me a thumbs up that you're seeing it. Okay, perfect. So this is what you're going to add to your purchase agreement if you're writing an offer on a short sale. And what it's going to do is it's going to add some terms to the purchase that the purchase agreement doesn't have to help protect the buyer, to set some standards for how we're going to handle this short sale escrow. So obviously the default is this is an addendum to a purchase agreement. The date of the purchase agreement, so it should match the date that the purchase agreement was written, the property address, and the buyer and seller's names. There's the top, right? This first section is going to talk about the short sale approval. This agreement is contingent upon seller's receipt of and delivery to buyer of a seller-approved written consent, short sale lender's consent, to the agreement from all existing secured lenders and lien holders. So what that means is for those short sales that have, you know, a first and a second, plus they have some other personal loan or some kind of lien or judgment that's placed on there that's causing the sale to become a short sale, that letter, you have to have a letter from every lien holder that is agreeing to the terms of this purchase so that they are agreeing to release the seller from the responsibility of those liens. And that's what a short sale is, right? A short sale is, I owe more than what I'm able to sell the property for. So the people who have carried these liens, who are the lenders, are accepting less than what I owe them, right? Because I'm not paying my mortgage. So that's what this is. So what it does is by default, it gives the seller 45 days after acceptance. Now we can change that to whatever we want to. But what it does is it gives the seller 45 days after acceptance to get the approval from whoever they have to get it from, whichever lenders or lien holders they have to get it from. And then what that does is it says, okay, buyer, if they don't have it in the 45 days, I'm not stuck. At day 45, I can send to the seller a notice to perform to say, hey, show me the proof of the consent from the lenders. And if they don't do it, my buyer can walk so that we're not stuck in an escrow forever. Now, in this market, chances are if a buyer gets into escrow and there's a chance that they're going to close this escrow, whether it's 30 days, 45 days, or 90 days from now, they're probably going to hang in. But at least what it does is it gives us a point of time where we could say, okay, it's day 45. We haven't gotten the approval yet. The seller can ask for an extension. The buyer can choose to or choose not to accept that extension. So what it does is it doesn't just leave us in limbo forever. Because I know of people in the past who have done short sales where they're in escrow for months and they don't know what's going on. They're not getting clear answers, and there's multiple lien holders, and it causes problems. And instead of us all just being stuck, we have a point at 45 days where we can make a decision on this. Is this something that we want to continue with, or if we want to move on from each other and go try to find something else? Is that fair? So it says here, I mean, we don't have to read all this stuff. It's just saying that it is contingent on that happening. The seller has 3 days after they receive their letter of approval, the consent, and the term sheet. They have 3 days to send it over to the buyer's agent. This is, again, stuff we already talked about, that they can remove the short sale lender's consent in writing, or they can cancel the escrow if they didn't get it. Here's where, like in a contingency of sale, right, where it's a buyer is selling a property to buy a property, or a seller's purchase of a replacement property, there's some reference to the timelines of our original purchase agreement. So in here, what it says is the time periods in this agreement for inspections, contingencies, covenants, and other obligations shall begin the day after seller delivers to buyer short sale lender's consent, satisfying 1B and 1F, right? That's that we've got the consent, we've got the terms, and we're moving forward. They approved it. So the default is that no time periods in this contract start until after we have short sale approval. That's the default. It's probably best to leave it that way because what we're asking for is for the buyer to put their deposit into escrow without knowing if this is ever going to be accepted. We're asking for the buyer to pay for inspections, pay for appraisals, get everything done without knowing if this is going to be approved. So, for example, if my appraisal contingency, look, let's forget about appraisal. Let's say if my loan contingency is 17 days, right? That's the default in the new purchase agreement. And we still have 45 days before we get the approval from the lender on whether or not they're going to accept it. Let's say it takes them 45 days. Well, we've got our loan approval at day 17, right? So it's time to remove the contingencies because the time periods, we wanted to keep the time periods the same as the purchase agreement. Remember, there's only a certain amount of time that a buyer's rate is good for, right? If I get approval, it's usually 30 days or so, and I could lose my rate before we get the approval from the bank. And now I don't qualify, and my contingencies are all up, everything's done. Just for smoother transactions, I would suggest that if you are a listing agent, that you are aware of the time periods and that you make sure that your seller is also aware that, hey, we're not going to get their deposit and we're not going to have them do their appraisal and their inspections and everything until the lender has approved our short sale, until the lender says, yes, we're good with that price, because it doesn't make sense. And as a buyer's agent, you're going to have buyers that are going to be upset with you if you don't explain to them what this means. Now, in this market, is a seller and a listing agent going to say to you, oh, no, you got to do everything now, whether we get the approval or not? Probably. And that just means that when you have this conversation with your buyer, what you have to make them understand is that they may pay for an appraisal, they may pay for an inspection, they may pay for other costs in the process of doing their due diligence to purchase this home. And then the bank may not approve that short sale that they have agreed upon, and the deal could go nowhere. So you've got to make sure that your buyers are prepared to spend money without actually getting anything. Now, that could be true in a regular transaction also. I could pay for an appraisal, pay for a home inspection, and the deal could cancel, and the buyer gets nothing. And I think we do a poor job of explaining that to buyers anyway. But it's really important in this because this is a really long process. Short sales. We're waiting on somebody else. So that now having that third party that has a say in where this escrow goes, I think it's imperative that they understand that if that's the terms of the offer getting accepted, is that they have to put their money in and do all of their inspections and due diligence prior to having an approval. They need to understand what that means. So you've got to do some, CYA, if you guys know what that means, right? So when you have that conversation with your buyer that says, hey, look, we're going to put our money into escrow. We're going to pay for an appraisal. We're going to pay for a home inspection. And if this doesn't get approved, we're not going to get that money back for the appraisal and the inspection. I need you to understand that. And when they say, yes, we understand it, then you're going to follow it up with an email about the conversation that you had saying, hey, here, I just want to clarify and make sure that there's some response for them so they can't ever come back and say, well, no, you didn't tell me I was going to lose the money. Now, the second issue with the time periods is the deposit, right? Which is right here, buyer's deposit check, where it says, hey, we're not going to put the deposit in until we get the approval. Or you check the listing agent, the seller check the box that says we're going to put it in now as per the agreement, right? Within 3 days of acceptance, 3 business days of acceptance. Here's the issue with this. Let's say that the property doesn't get approved, right? The bank doesn't approve it. And I've put my 10,000, 12, 15, 21,000, right? Because people are asking for 3% of the purchase price now for deposits. So I put my money in, and then the bank doesn't approve it. And the seller's losing their house. What motivation does the seller have to sign off on that deposit release? And I'm not saying 100% of the time it's going to be that way, but if I'm the seller that's losing my house and not paying the mortgage, what's my motivation if the bank doesn't approve my short sale? If they don't approve my short sale, that means they're probably going to foreclose on me. So what does it matter if I sign your release anyway? Because if they don't approve a short sale of a market-priced house, then that means the next buyer, they're not going to approve it either, and there's a good chance I'm going to lose it. So why do I have any motivation to sign up and release your deposit? So that's the danger of having the deposit in there prior to having the approval. Again, in this market, sellers and listing agents are probably going to ask you to do some things that are not super safe for your buyers, and that's going to be conversations for your buyer and you to decide how you want to move forward. But for you guys who I want to train to be the most professional and best listing agents out there, it's a conversation to have with your seller, the short sale seller, and make them understand, or hope they understand, what this means for buyers and for a smooth transaction. Go ahead, Jesus. I see you have your hand up.
Yes, but usually what I do when it's a short sale, I open escrow without a deposit until we get approval from the bank. That's what I do. I don't know if it's
Yeah,
wrong.
and that's what we just talked about. Yes, that's the right thing to do. That's what should happen. See, that's the thing is people think if we don't have a deposit, we don't have an escrow. That's not true. You're still going to open the escrow. You're still going to negotiate the short sale. You're just not going to have the buyer's money yet until you get the approval, and then, yes, the money's going to go in. So, yeah, no, that's the right way to do it. That's the right way to do it. So, kudos to you, Jesus. All right. So, this is just saying that there is no guarantee that the lender's going to approve it. The costs that are included are the buyers and sellers. This is about tax advice right here. Oh, if you accept an offer while you're a short sale, you still have to accept backup offer. Like if you don't have to accept backup offers, but if you get an offer, you still have to present it. Okay? Just the same way with any listing, short sale or not, even if you have an accepted offer and you're in escrow and you get offers, you're required to present those offers to the seller. Now, do you have to have backup offers? No. You don't have to, but you have to present the offers. Doesn't matter if you're 5 days from closing escrow. If you get an offer on the property, you have to present it to the seller. I just want to make that clear to you guys because I don't like those fights where like, no, I already have an offer, I'm not going to present it. Just know that right now, the way agents are behaving out there, believe me, a report of a violation to the board is coming. Okay? All right, so questions about the short sale addendum? Yes, Jesus.
Who do we present the offer to? The bank?
No, here's the thing. Your
Or the
seller
seller?
is still the one who is accepting or rejecting the offer. The bank just has to approve it. See, the bank is not the seller. The seller is the seller. So the seller makes a decision on this is the offer I want. The bank just has to rubber stamp it. They just have to say, oh, yeah, well, okay, we agree with you. This is fine. This is the one we'll take. So I still have to present it to my seller. But I don't have to send it to the bank. I don't have to do anything with it. I just have to present it to my seller. Okay? Eric, you had a question. Eric, you there? Okay. Well, Eric, when you figure out your sound, you can ask us a question because I see you're unmuted, but we don't hear anything. All right. We'll get back to it. Type it in the chat if you can't get your microphone fixed, and I'll go back to it. All right, let's move on. The next thing I want to show you guys is this. We're going to look at some advisories right now. On this one, since we just did the short sale addendum, we're going to look at the short sale information advisory. We're not going to dig into it. It just is an explanation of short sales, and this needs to be incorporated into your listing agreement and should be incorporated into your offers with the short sale addendum. And again, it's just an advisory. It's just information about the short sales. It has some definitions of some things. It talks about what is the process of getting a short sale accepted or approved and going through it. So again, just an information advisory. It's not a disclosure, it's nothing, but it should just be included so that everybody is clear on the process of the short sale. Okay. Let's see what we got here. When do we stop presenting offers to the seller? When the escrow closes. That's it. That's when you stop. Look, most people, if you tell them, hey, we're closing escrow tomorrow, we got loan docs, they're not going to send you an offer. I was using that as an extreme example, but anytime until that property is sold, right, until it closes escrow, if you get another offer, technically you have to present it. And I know that sometimes that could be troublesome, right, because you get a seller who says, well, wait a minute, I accepted an offer that was less than this. Well, sorry. This is what you chose at the time, okay? So that was the short sale information advisory. This is the trust advisory. Okay. So this trust advisory is when a successor trustee is selling a trust. So if I were, say, selling my home and it was the Kyle Estrada Family Trust, and I put it on the market and I'm still living, I'm still here, I'm going to be the one that's signing, I'm the seller, then it's treated like a regular sale, TDS, SPQ, all the stuff, right? And I don't need to do this trust advisory. But if, for example, I passed on and my successor trustee was the person that was selling the property, then we would have to include this into our purchase agreement. And what this does, this purchase agreement, it just talks about what is and isn't required of a successor trustee to provide as a disclosure in a sale. Now, if, for example, I were the successor trustee, say it was the Richard Estrada Trust, and I was the successor trustee and I lived in the home, it was my principal residence prior to me becoming the successor trustee and me selling the property, I am then required, I would still include this form, but I am then required to complete a TDS and SPQ just like a regular sale. But if it is not my principal residence, then I just have to disclose things that I know. And the thing where I would do that would be in an exempt seller's disclosure form. I still have to do an NHD report, right? These are the things that I have to comply with, right? I have to do the NHD report. We have to get the smoke detectors installed. The water heater needs to be strapped. The lead-based paint disclosure is required. Carbon monoxide devices are still needed to be installed, right? The FERPTA form still needs to be delivered, the tax withholding. The Megan's Law disclosure still has to be provided to the buyer. Now, these are the things that I may be exempt from depending. A seller, unless specified in 2A, right, where we talked about if it's my principal resident, does not have to complete, sign, and provide buyer with a real estate transfer disclosure statement or the natural hazard disclosure statement. Now, the statement is the form, we've talked about this during the disclosures, that is actually filled out by the seller. It's not the NHD report that we get from the third party. This one still requires the NHD report, okay? I have to now provide them with an exempt seller's disclosure of the things that I do know, okay? That's what right here, exempt seller disclosures. If there's obligations based on local law, like pre-sale inspection reports, 9A reports, the water conservation stuff in the city of LA, right? The certificate of compliance. I'm still obligated to perform those things, even though it's a trust sale. The broker still has to do an AVID, even though there is not a TDS, right? I mean, again, we have to do an AVID here in our office. The other offices out there may do an AVID, but there still have to be some level of agent's visual inspection disclosure. That's still required, even though there's no TDS, okay? So this needs to be done. You do it as the listing. You do it with your listing on a trust, and you do it at the time of sale. You have the buyer sign it. So you could use the same one, okay? Questions about the trust advisory? No, there is no SPQ required if it is the successor trustee, only the exempt seller's disclosure. Okay, so again, if it is the successor trustee who did not live in the property, this was not their principal residence, then they only have to provide the lead-based paint, the NHD report, and the exempt seller's disclosure. If it is the original trustee or a successor trustee that lived in the property, that was their principal residence, then they are still required to provide a TDS, SPQ, and all the other mandated disclosures, okay? So any other questions about the trust advisory? Again, not a lot to go into. It just is a breakdown of what you're required and not required to do. And it's the same thing with the REO advisory, right? So if it's the exact same thing, the terms and the things that are involved here in an REO advisory are basically the same as the the trust advisory. So again, this is just something that has to be delivered with your offer. Okay, when you're writing an offer on a REO, you include the REO advisory so that everybody is clear on what is required and what is not required, the obligations and the and the exemptions for those specific types of properties. Again, REO does not require a TDS or an SPQ. The only disclosures you're going to get are the lead-based paint, the NHD, and the exempt seller disclosure. Okay. Questions about the REO advisory? Again, it's almost identical to the trust. Okay, let's see. What do we want to talk about next? Let's talk about, well, since we're at it, let's open up that assignment of agreement addendum. Where did it go? Sorry. I can't find where I put it now. I think I have too many things open on my window here to find what I'm looking for. Let's see. Where are we? Let's see if it's in here. Nope, it didn't go there. Well, that's no fun. Is it in here? Well, darn it. I just downloaded that. All right, well, let me bring up the additional signature addendum while I'm trying to find my assignment of agreement addendum so we can talk about this. Okay. All right. So this additional signature addendum, it says right on the top. I don't want people to get the wrong idea about it. That you can use it to add people, because like Jesus asked at the beginning, do we need the additional signature addendum? Some agents believe that by doing this, I'm adding someone to the purchase agreement, and no, that's not true at all. So what we have to look at is this at the top right now. It says this form is not an assignment. It should not be used to add new parties after a contract has been formed. It's only there for my original agreement. When I'm sending you the contract and it has multiple buyers, this is what we're going to use. Okay? The persons or entities identified in paragraph 3 are additional signatories to the residential purchase agreement. Okay, or the residential listing agreement. You have the property address in there between the buyer and the sellers, right? You have the box to check off. So here's the, you put the seller's name up here, the buyer's name's down here. And you only put the buyer's names in that are signing this form. Okay? You don't have to put the other buyers in that were already signing. So if I had 4 buyers, right? If I have 4 buyers, 2 of them are signing the RPA, 2 of them are signing here. So I only put the 2 names that are signing here. Go ahead, Roberto. You had a question.
No, my question was only that did this Bill and Tom need to sign the purchase agreement and counter offers, or just this addendum? Let's say there are 4 people. There are 2 signing the...
No. This is on their original offer that we're making. They're going to sign this. They do have to acknowledge the counter offer. So technically, you would have to do another one of these for the counter offer.
Okay, so they don't have to sign the purchase agreement?
No, because the other 2 have signed the purchase agreement. These 2 are signing here. Them signing here is as if they signed the purchase agreement.
Okay, I want to make sure that was the case.
Yeah, yes, that's the case.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see. We got here a question in the chat that says, does it matter what order come first, buyer or seller? That's up to you. I mean, however you put the order in there. So whatever the first 2 that you put in the buyer's names on the purchase agreement are going to be the ones that have their names on the purchase agreement to sign. So the following 2 would be here. But the order that you put it in, that's up to you. That's up to you. Okay? So you're going to put those 2 names. Then they're going to have it here where they're going to sign. Their printed name will be here. If they have a title, or or if somebody else is signing on behalf, like, for example, the second seller, it's not just Bill Smith, it is the Bill Smith Family Trust, right? If that's the case, then the buyer's going to go here. It's going to say Bill Smith Family Trust here. It's going to be signed for by Jim Smith, let's say, because he's the successor trustee of that, and it's going to have his title. It says successor trustee. Now, if there is no title, right, if there's no separate person signing, there's no representative signing on behalf of an entity, then it would be Bill Smith here, and there would be nothing here and nothing here in the title, and Bill Smith would sign his name and date it down here. Now, right here, what you're looking at, these are initials. I either initial here and agree, or I initial here and I do not agree to liquidated damages provision. So if you want them to agree to liquidated damages like the other buyers maybe did in the purchase agreement, they're going to initial this first blank space. If you have dispute resolution, right, the arbitration of disputes clause initialed in the purchase agreement, then you're going to have them initial here. If you don't, then you're going to have them initial here that they don't agree to have the disputes decided in accordance with arbitration provision. Is that clear? So only people that are going to sign it are these people, Bill and Tom Smith. Bill Smith here, Tom Smith here, have them initial here if they're agreeing to those clauses. Okay? Questions about the additional signature addendum? Any questions? Okay. So again, remember, this form is only for when there are multiple buyers that do not fit on the purchase agreement, and then you send it with your offer. Okay. Someone just asked if I filled one of these out incorrectly, do I need to resubmit my offer? That might be a conversation with the listing agent if they want you to do that. You may not have to, but it would depend on what you mean by incorrectly. So I'd have to look at it and review it and let you know. Okay. All right. So let's move on. Since I found my assignment of agreement addendum now, let's look at the assignment of agreement addendum, because I think that it is not used enough. There's been too many transactions where I've seen people adding and removing buyers and just using amendments, and that is not the proper way to do it. Okay, so we need to use the right. We need to make sure that we're using the correct form for adding and removing buyers from transactions, and that form is this one, the assignment of agreement addendum. That's what it's for. It's for adding a buyer, it's for removing a buyer, and it's for assigning the entire transaction from one buyer to another. Okay? The following terms and conditions are hereby incorporated to be a part of the purchase agreement or other, right, whatever it may be. Maybe there was some other kind of agreement. Whatever the date of that agreement is, the property address, the buyers and sellers' names. So here's what we're going to look at. Partial or total assignment. Partial assignment, adding a buyer. So if Roberto was the only buyer on the property and then he wanted to add Jesus to that purchase agreement, right, because he needed him for either a co-borrow or some other reason, you would check off partial assignment, and it says buyer is adding the assignee or assignees named below to the agreement and granting to such assignees a partial interest in the agreement. So Roberto's purchasing it. He checks off that box because he's adding Jesus. In C, right here, assignees' names, we're going to write Jesus's name. And that's it. That's all you're going to do for that part of it, adding a buyer. Okay? If you're adding the buyer, this is what you should be doing if you're the buyer's agent, is you should be giving the documents that you receive from the seller to the buyer, the new buyer and the assignee, and make sure that they have already acknowledged those disclosures, and send them back with the assignment agreement, right? With the assignment of agreement addendum. That's right here. That's the default. Or if you haven't had a chance to do it, maybe you haven't received them yet, then you would check this box off right here. Okay? It already, by default, says the assignee has been pre-qualified or pre-approved by buyer's lender as per the agreement, and a copy is attached. So you now have to send them a new pre-approval or a new pre-qual that shows the new borrower on there. Okay? Well, now here's the thing. That's for any assignment. That means either a partial or a full assignment. We're going to talk about a full assignment right now. So these are just some things that we have to check off. You have to disclose buyer has received consideration from assignee. You have to disclose it. If you're assigning something, let's go back here, right, to a total assignment. I'm either deleting a buyer or we're having a whole new buyer altogether. If I do that, say, for example, I got the property into escrow. Right, I got the property in escrow. I made the offer, I got it, and I decided I don't want it. And then Jesus comes along and says, "Oh man, you're so lucky you got that investment." Yeah, but I don't want it anymore. Jesus goes, "I'll give you $5,000 if you assign it to me. I'll take it." And he gives me the $5,000, and I now I fill out this total assignment to give it to Jesus. I have to disclose to the seller that I made $5,000 to assign it to Jesus. Why would I need to disclose that to the seller? Why do you guys think? Anybody have an idea?
That money should belong to him.
I'm sorry, what was that?
That money should kind of belong to him, right?
Well, I mean, in a way, yeah. Think about it. If Roberto was a seller and I got the offer accepted at $400,000, right, and he's like, "Great, I'll take it. I'll sell it for $400,000," and then I decide I don't want anymore, so I give it to Jesus. But say Jesus pays me $5,000, that means the actual sales price of the property was $405,000. Why wouldn't Roberto say, "Hey, wait a minute. If somebody's going to pay $405 for it, why shouldn't I get the $405?" And what that means is that the seller does not have to approve that assignment. Okay? The seller does not have to approve the assignment. Now, if we keep that secret from the seller, right, we say, "Oh, no, I didn't get any money," but we did get money, and somehow that seller finds out, there's a problem, right? There's going to be an issue because you hid from them the money that changed hands, and you can't do that. Somebody says, would this also be valid on a short sale or a probate? Yeah, any assignment is valid as long as the seller agrees. Yes. The problem you may have with a probate is the court confirmation stuff. If you're doing it prior to court confirmation, it could be an issue. If you do it after, I'm not sure, but the probate's the only one, but short sale should not be an issue to be able to assign it. Once the bank approves it, the banks approve the sales price. The bank's not approving the buyer; they're approving the sales price. Omar, you unmuted. Did you have a question?
Yeah. Good morning, Jinx. Good morning, Kyle. Hey, so you said the buyer is regarding the assignment fee or getting compensated for assigning the contract.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying that the seller is supposed to be aware of it, but they're not authorized. They don't need to authorize it.
Well, they do. It's right here. I have to disclose it, right? That I've received this consideration, whatever the amount is. Okay. The issue is when I take this to the seller, I say, "Okay, here's seller. The buyer has now assigned the property to somebody else, and they're getting paid for it." The seller doesn't have to sign this form anymore, which means they're now going to deny the assignment. Okay. And the new purchase agreement has a time period on it, which says, "Hey, you have 17 days to do any assignment." So if I get past day 17 and I've had the buyer remove all their contingencies, and then the buyer says, "Oh, I want to assign it to, Omar," and Omar's going to give me $5,000, and I say, "No, Omar's not. I'm not going to allow the assignment." Guess what? Now your deposit is at risk because you've removed your contingencies. So that's what I mean is that they don't have to allow it. Is they just won't sign this document if they see that they've given you money. Is that fair?
Okay, I get it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So if I'm doing a total assignment, right, where I'm putting a whole new buyer or I'm taking a buyer off, what's going to happen here is this. So let's say that Angel and I bought a property together, right? We wrote the offer on investment together, and then I said, "I don't want to be on it anymore. I'm done." So what's going to happen here when we check the box for this total assignment, because we're deleting a buyer, is we're going to put the assignee's name here is going to be Angel. Because we are removing me and assigning the entire purchase back to Angel. So then I will have Angel's name here as the assignee. And when we sign down here at the bottom, Angel and I will both sign as the original buyers. And then Angel will sign again as the assignee. And now what we've just done is we've removed me from the purchase, and the whole purchase is 100% Angel now instead of 50-50. Angel, you unmuted. You had a question.
Isn't that considered a partial assignment, what you just said?
No, that is a total assignment.
A total assignment.
Yeah, a partial assignment is only when I'm adding a buyer. A total assignment is when I'm transferring it to any other buyer besides the original buyers.
Okay.
So you see right here,
Yeah.
total assignment, new buyer or deleting a buyer, partial assignment, adding a buyer.
Okay. You also said that the to assign the purchase or the purchase to we now have 17 days of this. Is that
Yeah,
what you said?
it's actually referenced in the purchase agreement now as of the new RPA that came out in December. Is there is a specific time period for assignments to be done, right? 17 days. It matches all the inspections and investigations. That's it. That if the listing agent is doing their job right and they're asking for contingency removals, one of those things, one of those contractual obligations that's going to be removed is your ability to assign it at day 17.
Okay.
Okay. In the chat, we have time periods never pause or start over. No, they do not. The time periods keep running exactly as they were from the very beginning. Okay. If you are removed and get paid any money, even though the sales price is the same, can the seller still now not approve the sale? Yes, they could. The transfer, like let's say that Angel's paying me off to get out. That means there's still extra money in here, right? Buyers are from assignee and the amount of, right? Could be, right? There could be an issue where, hey, why is there money changing hands that I'm not getting? No, I'm not going to approve that. So just remember that this is what we're using. Adding, removing, or completely giving it to a new buyer. This is the form, nothing else. Not amendments, not addendums, nothing. This is it. Okay? So any other questions about this assignment of agreement is, and here you go right here, assignment not accepted. This assignment was not accepted by seller on. So it even has a specific rejection from the seller back to the buyer. So keep that in mind, right? I think what happens is people just assume that I have the right to assign it. No, I have an amount of time where I can attempt to assign it if necessary, but the seller never has to agree to it. Okay? So keep that in mind. Don't just assume. Right? You know what they say about when you assume what you do. All right. So let's look at what else we got here. The time frame for that is 17 days. Okay. These are going to be really quick just because I want to, make sure you guys are familiar with them in any kind of a 1031 exchange, since we just had that 1031 exchange class. This is the seller's intent to exchange addendum, the buyer's intent to exchange. It has some terms. It gives you the ability to extend escrows and do some things to help buy you some time to make those exchanges. Okay, so I just want you to see that these exist. Anytime you're doing an exchange, you need to incorporate this. So if you have a buyer that is moving into a purchase from an exchange, you have to include your buyer's intent to exchange form with your offer. If you are a seller that is doing an exchange on the property you're selling, you need to make sure that you incorporate the seller's intent to exchange addendum with your counters, so that way it is agreed upon by the buyer and the seller. Especially for the seller who's got to do an exchange, you need to have these boxes filled in properly, right? Like this one that says, this transaction shall be canceled, buyer's deposit shall be returned to buyer, and all parties shall be released from any further obligation to each other. That's if you can't do the exchange, you're going to use this form basically as part of the cancellation. This is what we're going to want to add is the close of escrow for this transaction shall be extended by a maximum of blank days so that you can complete all the arrangements for the exchange. And because remember what we learned in that 1031 class is that we have to start the 1031 process while we're in escrow, not after it closes, even though the exchange process is done after the close of escrow. So keep that in mind. Okay, just wanted to show those to you. But the ones that I really wanted to talk to you about are these two, because there's still some confusion, I think, of what gets used and when it gets used. So here's two different forms. We have the amendment of existing agreement terms, and we have an addendum. Now, for years and up to yesterday, I still have agents asking me questions about things they need to change, terms of a transaction, and they walk up here with an addendum and say, what do I put in my addendum? And my answer to them is always, you put nothing in the addendum, because that's not the form you use to negotiate terms of a change of an already accepted transaction. Okay. So there's plenty of you of the 37 that are here right now that have heard me say this over and over and over and over again. The addendum is only for space, basically. It is not for negotiating. Okay. It's for if I don't have enough room on a line in another document, then I'm going to refer to this addendum, right? If I have a long list in a request for repairs that doesn't fit in that little space for a request for repairs, I'm going to write C addendum, and then I'm going to put my list on this addendum. But this addendum is not for a straight negotiation. So if I want to change my price, do I use an addendum? No, I don't use an addendum, but agents love to. If I'm asking for a credit, do I use an addendum? No, I do not. It is just for space. All those other things where we're saying, hey, I need a credit. We need to, even if you want to do extensions and you're doing multiple extensions, you don't want to use an extension of time addendum, which I should have probably included in here. This is something that you could use to negotiate. This is for credits. This is for, changes in sales price, the amendment of existing agreement terms. And it looks very similar to an addendum if you look at the two side by side, right? Just the information at the top, right? And then this blank space to write in whatever you want. But you look at here at the top, it says this is a proposal to amend. I'm making a proposal to amend the terms and conditions of the purchase agreement or of the lease agreement, right? I'm making a proposal to make these changes. And the reason why it says that it has a proposal is because if you look down here at the bottom, it has an expiration date. So if I'm the buyer, I'm going to check that box. If I'm the seller, I'm going to check that box. And it says the seller or the buyer proposes this amendment of an existing agreement term, which may be withdrawn by the party initiating this proposed amendment at any time prior to acceptance and shall be deemed revoked unless by 5 p.m. on the third day after it's signed by the initiating party, it is not valid anymore, right? So like if I send it to Jesus and I say, hey, here's the proposed change, right? I need a credit of $10,000 for closing costs. And then I send it to him. If by 5 p.m. on the third day after I send it, right? So if I send it today, then Friday, Saturday, Sunday is the third day. If he doesn't sign it and return it and accept it, then it's not valid any longer. Right? It's not valid any longer. If he accepts it, then he's going to sign here. If he does not accept my proposal, right? If I say, hey, I need a credit, if he doesn't want to give me the credit, then guess what he does? He initials it and puts a date that he is rejecting. He is not accepting this proposed amendment to our agreement. Now, the reason why this is important is because on this addendum, if you look at the bottom, there is nothing that gives this an expiration date. There is no place to reject it, right? There's nothing we could do here. So what happens is these kind of live forever. So in the example where I just said right now, I sent to Jesus a request for a $10,000 credit, right? I send him this amendment and he doesn't want to give me the credit. He rejects it. But let's say I do it like most agents do it and I use an addendum instead of an amendment. And I send that same request. Seller agrees to pay $10,000 to buyer for buyer's closing costs. And he doesn't agree with it. They usually just ignore it. Or they'll send you another addendum that says the seller and buyer agree that the seller will credit $5,000 to the buyer. Right? So then the buyer says, well, I need more than $5,000. So they send another addendum, addendum number 3 to the purchase agreement that says we need an $8,000 credit, right? Because we needed 15 before or 10 before. Now it's 8 because they offered 5. And now the seller is upset that you're asking for credits and they send you an amendment that says buyer and seller agree there will be no credits paid to the buyer because they feel like they have to reference it, right? And now the buyer goes, oh, crap, now they're not going to give me anything. Now they said 0. I'm going to go back and I'm going to sign that $5,000 credit one because it's already signed by the seller. So if I sign it, then that means it's fully executed. So is that a legit amendment to the contract? Does the seller now going to be required to pay that credit? Now I see some people shaking hands, but why not? It's fully executed. It's an amendment to this agreement. How do you prove that it's not legitimate? Go ahead, Angel.
I think my reasoning would be because there are already three multiple addendums. The second and the third override the first and second.
But guess what? The first nor the second, or the first nor the third, are fully executed. So how can they override anything? Because they're only signed by one party. There is only one amendment signed by both parties, which means it's technically, legally, it is valid. We have an agreement. Okay. So do you see the danger in using an amendment for negotiating? Because we don't negotiate properly with it. Look, the right way, if you had to have used an amendment, like if I'm on the other side of a transaction and I have an agent that doesn't know about the amendment of existing agreement terms and they're sending me addendums that they're requesting negotiating and changing our transaction. If they do that and then I respond to it, then I'm going to respond to it on the right form, but I'm going to reference that addendum, right? So in my amendment of existing agreement terms, which is going to be my response to addendum number 1 that they send me with the request, is going to say, seller will credit the buyer $5,000 instead of the $10,000 they're requesting on addendum number 1, and this hereby invalidates addendum number 1, right? So there's no question that addendum number 1 doesn't exist anymore. You have to still, if there's any kind of negotiation done on an addendum, it has to be referenced that the previous addendums are no longer valid. But we don't do that. We don't think that way. We go the fastest way we can, and we just put the new terms on, and we just assume whichever one gets signed is the one that's going to be accepted. Well, guess what? Right? And here's the other thing: in your transactions, if I have 5 addendums where we're going back and forth and negotiating, even if we finally sign addendum number 5 and everybody agrees to the terms on addendum number 5 and both parties sign it, I still have to have 1 through 4 in my file. Because if there's ever going to be a audit of the file, if there's God forbid, a lawsuit or something happens, and I only have addendum number 5, but not addendum number 1s through 4, they're going to say, well, wait a minute, what happened on addendums 1 through 4? And what happens normally is buyers and sellers, what do? Well, we didn't agree to addendum 1, so they throw it away. Because it's not fully executed. Okay, so stop with the addendums. Addendums are only for when you need space, period. End of story, that's it. Everything else after your offer is accepted is an amendment of existing agreement terms. I mean, I can't stress that enough, guys. It's got to be that way. Now, the good thing is I've got the TCs where they know that it is no more addendums for stuff like that. It's for the rest of you that don't use the TCs and aren't here on contract class that I got to keep putting that message out there, that it is the amendment of existing agreement terms. Okay? So please, 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 let's start using less and less addendums unless we just need space. All right, so that is it for today. Does anybody have any questions? Anything we talked about? Any other things, any issues you have going on? Any questions right now while we finish up? No?
Kyle,
Yes, sir.
sorry to go back. We were not that there on the beginning when I asked the question. So after that person was added to the contract, from there on, now he's going to be added in a additional signature addendum, right? From every
It depends on what it. Well, it depends on what it is, because they're going to acknowledge on disclosures. You don't need to have an additional signature addendum for the disclosures. Just acknowledge on the disclosure the initials, the signature. Just do it anywhere on there. You're fine, right? That's okay. So if there's other stuff, like if there is like an amendment of existing agreement terms that's added, then yeah, you're probably going to have an additional signature addendum if there's not enough space, right, for the amount of buyers you have.
You muted yourself. Can I hear you?
to my AirPods. What happened right now?
Now it's working.
Yeah, you guys can hear me okay? Okay.
Yeah,
So-
you're good now.
Yeah. Okay. So disclosures, it's fine. Acknowledge those anywhere. Just sign even though there's not a signature spot. Initial, even though there's not an initial spot. That's okay. But things like an amendment of existing agreement terms, yes, I would then add an additional signature addendum to that. Okay.
What if, like, some of the agents, I mean, that happens to me a lot. They invent a third space for the third signer.
I'm sorry. They just
on the
write. They put a
contract-
space.
Yeah,
You know what? Here's the thing. Like, I want you guys to do everything the right way. I'm always going to teach you guys to do things the right way. Other people are going to take shortcuts, right? And we can't do anything about it. That ultimately becomes a decision for you and your seller. Do you want to go? Do you want to go far enough to say no? Now you have to submit additional signature addendum, or are you okay with accepting it? Because in the long run, legally, it's going to be enforceable because there's signatures on it. So, you know what? I mean, I wouldn't make too big of a deal of it. You guys, when you write your offers, do it the right way. If you're a listing agent and you get stuff done like that, sometimes it's okay to let it go. Angel, did you have something you want to say?
I have a listing. The property is in a trust. The trustees are still alive, living in the property.
Yes.
Upon taking the listing, would I need that any additional documents to go with the listing?
No.
Forms.
No, it's a regular sale. It's just the seller is a trust instead of an individual. That's all. But it's a regular sale.
Okay.
Same disclosures, everything.
Uh-huh. All right.
Yeah, all the same. Someone did ask a non-contract question about the city of Gardena needing a business license. That's a great question. I do not know that off the top of my head. You're probably gonna have to call the city directly and ask them. But I do not know that. But if I find out, I'll let you know, Marisol. All right, guys. Any other questions?
The TCs might know that answer.
The TCs may know that. That's true. Ask the TCs. All right, guys. If you guys don't have anything else, I will let you go as it is 12 o'clock now. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. I love that you guys listen to me ramble on about these. And if you need anything, you know where to find me. And if you missed any part of this or you had to leave early, it's on YouTube later today. All right. So take care, guys.